check out really fast, and so he should be here
Okay,
at 6:30. Between 6:30.
I did turn my phone off
Hmm.
so that it wouldn't disturb us, so. That's what that call is.
Hang on, don't worry.
Okay.
Did you get my email for Thursday?
Oh, I know, I didn't check it.
I can only come for an hour.
I figured that, I,
Swamp.
that's okay, because honestly, I thought maybe that was strategically in your favor, if you even wanted to, then, so. No, I think that worked out well.
I come for the first hour.
Yeah, no, that's what I figured,
Yeah.
so. Yeah, originally it was today, and then I got to. But,
I'm glad. Well, I mean, so I at least can attend a little bit.
yeah. Something else comes up, just feel free to share whatever you want to share.
And there's Rich and there's Deanne.
Hey, buddy, glad you got your signatures in there. Selectman Barrow.
Thanks to the town staff, last minute.
I told Paul, I had several people I could have scared you to.
She had like 100 names.
I mean, that's, like 90% of Warren's great.
I asked a lot of folks and they said, Mary already signed mine. I was going door to door and then that's good. And then I had folks tell me they weren't registered to vote. It was against their religion to vote. Let's see. So I was like, I'm done. I guess. And then a lot of the folks over there are short-term rentals.
Yeah,
And then 3 families that live right on within a few houses. The Billingsley were there, but the rest, a lot of those folks were gone for funerals, wherever.
Yeah.
well, if it makes you feel any better, some of my signatures ended up not being registered, so it was a good thing I had a few extra. So it's a good thing I even got that 90%. Glad you did it. Glad you found them.
Deanne, how are you feeling?
Doing okay. How about you?
I'm getting there. Every day gets better. Yep.
Still coughing a lot, but it's sporadic now instead of all the time.
Yeah.
If you're talking to us, Rich, you're muted.
My wife and daughter are both sick with COVID, so I'm trying to avoid close contact with folks. Actually, Aisha's over it, EJ is not, so.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We appreciate your kind care.
Hello there, Jerry.
Hello, Jerry. Hi there, John.
Hope it stays warm in here. I forgot my stuff.
I noticed the heat had been turned up.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Hi, Mary.
Hey, John.
Hello. You don't sound yourself.
I'm good, thanks.
I'm good.
And Mary says.
No dog yet?
No,
I'll keep, it's,
I'm gonna do some dog sitting the end of it.
a picture of the dog.
Oh, she's a beauty. I don't have a picture. She's
I have a picture.
my neighbor. Yeah. Yeah. She's a golden retriever that's black.
Really? That's cool. I've never heard of those.
Very sweet.
She must be mixed with something.
Sweet.
So what's up?
So is he pregnant at braces in his building? Just gonna.
Everyone got it?
He may join us.
Versus.
Yeah.
Honestly, that is a technique.
It's been a month.
We all, you know, it's really one unsung. Benefits coming out of it.
Oh, I sure did. Last week's Dr. Cog meeting was supposed to be in person and the weather is turning sour and I was gonna just miss it because I'm not gonna white knuckle all the way down to downtown. Yeah, and they switched it to Zoom. Yeah.
You know, there's really a place for instance. But I
Yeah.
just work for.
I think we got last
I hear it.
check.
Way down
You need it
there.
around
And they're very, I don't have to attend the meetings. Once in a while, they meet.
But during the day.
Zooming in and we get it done and it really,
Yeah.
it's good for everyone.
Yeah, well,
I think it's also. 30% improvement.
all righty. And Rob is gonna be late, already called and let us know, so my clock says 6 o'clock. So I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Georgetown to order. It is Tuesday, January 24th, 6 p.m. and 2023. Let's throw in the year. Let's go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next, we'll do roll call. I am Lynette Kelsey, Police Judge. Rob Connell, as I said, is going to be late. Deanne Powell.
Present, but it appears I'm having video problems. If it keeps up, I'll cut the video altogether and just be a name.
Okay. John Jennings.
I'm here.
Paul Hinton. Here. Mary Smith. Rich Barrows.
Here,
All righty. Agenda approval. Does anybody have anything they want to add to the agenda or delete or change? Yes.
I would just like to add, the professional services agreement, to work with HR Green. And that will be during staff items.
Okay.
Could we also do some, an update on the, audio acoustic stuff going on? You know, what's happening? When are we going to get better sound?
I think if Rick had anything to share with us, it'd be in his task list. And why don't we add that to the task list?
It's hard.
Oh, it is. Okay. So if there is nothing to report, then it's,
Yeah.
yeah, no.
Very good.
Anything else?
I'm on.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda as amended? I'm sorry?
I'll make that motion to.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, audience business. Members of the audience have 5 minutes to present any matter of interest not already on the agenda. Do we have anybody?
Not virtually, no.
Okay. Seeing none and no one, let's move on. We've got the payables tonight are from January 6th through January 19th, 2023. Any questions on those payables?
I just don't.
There were a couple electric bills that were pretty high. Why is that? There were different sections and the whole thing came out to 2 or 3 grand here and 2 or 3 grand there, so it was pretty expensive.
Part of it's just the winter times with heat and
My bills,
And my bill has doubled. Yeah.
Yeah.
there was a
I think-
story on the news last night.
Yeah. Utility bills have increased pretty dramatically over the last couple of months.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Maybe the Christmas lights too.
Yeah. It all draws juice. If there are no questions, any further questions?
I'm ready. I'll make a motion to approve the payables from 1/6/2023 to 1/19/2020.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the payables. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have the minutes from our last meeting, which was on January 10th, 2023. Let's correct the date. The year is missing a 2. Okay. And I already gave Jen some corrections to the minutes. Did anybody else have any more?
I had some, but I gave them to her also.
I mean, I can summarize all of those. The first one was page, if you want me to.
Please.
No.
Page 1, under audience business, should have been
That's okay.
here and, I forgot the D on and.
Okay.
Page. Two, under audience business immediately was not raising funds for the not for the annexation of ground balls, but for the purchase of it. And then page 6, at the bottom, I forgot to put who seconded in the motion at the very bottom, that was Jenny. The vote was
Okay.
unanimous, the motion passed. And then on page 7, I accidentally wrote under spending professional services contract that it was not $5, it was 45 to 50. And then I forgot to put the executive session in, so I added that. And then, okay, I had a misspelling in the audience. Under town administrator's report and task list, the second bullet, for the first one, oh, yeah, sorry. Rose Street B&B submitted a letter of opposition to the lodging tax. Their letter was, they were wanting clarification on it instead of opposition. That was all I had.
Okay.
I noticed something in the paragraph below there under the election schedule. It says Monday, April 3rd. Is it really on a Monday? Usually elections are on Tuesdays.
Well, ours is Georgetown. Georgetown has different rules and we're always on Monday.
In the charter.
Yep.
That simple.
Okay.
I move to accept the minutes as amended and
Second,
corrected.
John.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the January 10th meeting as corrected, amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Under new and unfinished business, I want to start us off tonight with just a mention that this coming Saturday, January 28th, 2023, the town of Georgetown will be 155 years old. Where's the confetti? So, as we all know, and I love to remind people, we were formed under a territorial charter because the state of Colorado was still a territory at that time. I did ask Chris Bradley for some quirky history bits, and she complied as she usually does. She enjoyed looking stuff up. With some bits out of newspapers and such. We didn't really have a newspaper in town at the time, but things were mentioned at later times. But the Weekly Miners Register, which was from Central City, July 2nd, 1867, makes a mention. We all remarked farewell and slipped rapidly forward to the funereal town that has aggregated to itself the title of Mill City, which is down near Dumont. Downeyville. Little or no improvement is observable thereabouts, either in mining or in the growth of the town. Downeyville is silent as the tomb. McCoy wanted to locate the penitentiary there because it would be so economical to the government. There was a good many holes around there that would make admirable prisons. The old Bartola stamper stands idle, houseless and forlorn, a rusty monument of past enterprise, sunk and lost in the surrounding hills. But then they move on to Georgetown. Georgetown greets the eye and moves the imagination with the liveliest pictures as you reach the summit of the gentle elevation which hides it from view until this point is reached. The buildings, mostly new and neatly constructed, seem to have sprung up spontaneously from the earth like trees, grass, and flowers. None of that dingy, decayed, tumble-down appearance that so often marks the older mining towns is seen anywhere about the place. Bright, cozy cottages are on either hand, painted snowy white and adorned with fresh green blinds and overshadowed with spruce and pine. The next bit she dug out for us was from the Colorado Miner, which was a weekly publication, and this one was from their edition on May 9th, 1872, and it's titled The Old Landmarks. We republish for the benefit of all concerned the following declarations of principles, calling a special attention to resolve 3D as vitally bearing on our growth and prosperity just at this time. So they're repeating past news, which starts off at a mass meeting of the citizens of Georgetown held on Saturday evening, November 24th, 1866. The Reverend Clark Whitmer was called to the chair and C.W. Dennison was elected secretary. Misters E.W. Knott, J.T. Herrick, J.T. Harris, W.A. Brown, and Professor F. Dibben, a committee previously appointed and reported the following preamble and resolutions which were unanimously adopted. Whereas the growing prosperity and rapidly increasing population of this district demands that some steps be taken to procure a legal incorporation of organization of centers of population, and whereas it is impracticable, to secure united action in measures of local interest, economy in public expenditures, and uniformity in public improvements without such action. And whereas the interests of the people of this district are one and the same, and union of feeling and action is the only means by which we can establish confidence abroad in the value of our mines and successful mining operations in our midst. And whereas every consideration of self-interest conclusively establishes the fact that fair, just, and impartial dealing should characterize the transactions of this community and local matters, it is hereby resolved that the citizens of this district apply to the legislature for a town or village charter for a town or village organization to be known as Georgetown, with the following boundaries to wit, and then it lays out the boundaries. Resolved that until some steps can be taken to perfect legal organization, it is expedient to adopt the following regulations for the present government of this community, more particularly in regard to preempting and improving the vacant lands in this vicinity. And it goes on to list the first 8 regulations. And then finally, on motion, Misters J.T. Herrick, H.K. Pearsons, and W.H. Gray were appointed a committee to draft bylaws and take measures for procuring a charter. And in accordance with Article 5, Mr. H.C. Chapin was appointed to secure and keep in his possession a copy of the survey for inspection. On motion of Professor Frank Dibbins, Misters E.W. Knott, J.R. Herrick, and W.A. Brown were appointed a committee to procure the publication of the proceedings in the Daily Miners Register and Black Hawk Mining Journal, and also 100 copies for distribution. Adjourned, and this was submitted by C.W. Dennison, Secretary. And then she's got a bit from the Colorado Miner from November 14th, 1874, about the early days discovery of silver in Clear Creek County. And one of the paragraphs reads, "The rich silver mines about Georgetown were not the first to reveal themselves as such to the search of the prospector. This honor belonged to the Gus Belmont lode far upon McClellan Mountain in September 1864, only a little over 10 years ago. James C. Huff, Robert W. Steele, and Robert Taylor, having heard of the discoveries over on Snake River, concluded to explore the high range in the county. On the 29th of September, a party of 7, Mr. Steele, Cox, Patterson, Dibbin, Huff, Peck, and Taylor, left Georgetown, then a small village whose inhabitants were hunting for gold. They crossed the South Fork and went up Griffith Mountain on the Nan Smith Trail and crossed the creek again at the mouth of the Leavenworth Creek near the Equator Lode. Proceeding up the creek, they camped that night at the mouth of Huff Gulch. Yeah. I think we'll call it at that. Just wanted to make sure everybody remembers the birthday. Anybody else have anything to add? Yes, Deanne.
And next time could we, well, I'd like it. I don't know if everybody else would, but could you copy out those? I'm assuming they're pieces out of a newspaper and just include them in our packets, or maybe, but a pre-printed one that from the newspaper kind of thing that shows what you just read.
I just got those from Chris Bradley today, so that's why they were not in your packet previously. And yes, I did have Jen print out a copy for you, so it'll be in your box.
Thank you.
You bet.
That's really cool stuff.
It is. It is. So on to the second item, which is ordinance number 1, series 2023. This is a first reading, an ordinance amending the Georgetown Municipal Code by the addition of a new chapter 17.49 concerning affordable housing.
Would you like for me to start, Jerry, or would you like to start?
I can make a few points and you can help me out.
Yeah.
This draft is put together. It's really, as you can see, draft. There's any number of policy choices the board is going to have to make before this can, move forward to second reading. But I was able to take it to a point at which there's a bunch of blanks, because those are the things that in most cases need some policy assistance from the board. I recognize there's probably some typos, some cross-reference issues, but if the board's going to focus on the policy here, that's where to spend your time. trust Rick and I to get, those details fixed, but you'll notice that there's a couple of key policy decisions that, or at least directions that have been given to me to work with. One is that this affordable housing requirement of a fraction of new residential development be placed on developments with 3 or more dwelling units. That's, policy question number 1, and municipalities put that number or percentage at all sorts of places. 3 units is kind of on one end of the scale, frankly. Other communities have it at a higher number, but it really is kind of community specific. That's policy question number 1. Policy question number 2 is, okay, well, who have you got to reserve those units for, or must they be available to buy or rent? Who's eligible to do that? You have a definition of eligible household, and it's residents that are employed in Clear Creek County, work at least 30 hours a week, and make 80% of their income from a business in the county. And again, those are policy questions too. Those numbers can go up and down. That's above my pay grade to make those policy choices. But that's clearly when you say this much must be reserved for eligible households, that's one question. And who are eligible is another question. And those are maybe 2 of the most fundamental aspects of this ordinance. There's deed restrictions and various ways to implement that policy that you see throughout in terms of where it can be located. There's the deed restrictions, better description of eligible applicants, and how you can satisfy your percentage requirement. So it starts the conversation. Rick, you might describe sort of where some of these recommendations came from and what outreach or what response we've gotten. We've got some comments today. And then we can talk about how the board wants to move this forward. Obviously, a lot of blanks and whatnot to fill in. I'm guessing, then I'll shut up, but I'm guessing that after a good, healthy discussion, we'll get some direction from you, probably then fill in some of the blanks, bring it back to you on first reading. I don't think it's ready to just go to second reading, public hearing, and back to you on first reading and see if it's then ready to go to the next step. Rick, tell us a little bit background.
So thanks, Jerry. Great
Yeah.
summary. This is, I think, a discussion and concern that we've all heard from the county as a whole, but it's near and dear to our hearts as well in Georgetown. This was brought to the Planning Commission, and we had a memo basically just discussing what the potentials for an ordinance would look like. And the Planning Commission was unanimous in the way that their thoughts were. They wanted all development to have to be under this restriction, except single family homes. But as far as development goes, anything that would exceed a duplex. And I know that that's very tight. And we kind of pushed back a little bit to make sure they understood what that meant. And when we have developers coming, it's really hard for developers to have a percent, we're looking at 20% or 21%. What would it take financially to be able to put off a development like that? Is that significantly hindering Georgetown for any developments to come? After that discussion, what was clear is they really want restricted development, so that all development would have to have a portion so that we are preserving affordable housing in every way we can. I know we're doing it in other ways too. We're looking at code changes such as ADUs. We're looking at code changes for the gateway commercial to put residential on top so that we would provide more housing options. So we're looking at many ways to do this, but as far as new development, especially with multifamily focused, is to restrict a 20% of a development in order to reserve affordable housing for the class of people right now that is our working class. And if we don't do something, they were extremely afraid that our businesses were going to collapse. And so they were willing to make drastic measures in order to preserve that situation in our town. And so this was thoughts that we took to Jerry, and Jerry came back with some more thoughts, and this is kind of where we're at. And I know that we have received a letter from Craig Abrahamson kind of wanting us to continue to think through this as we're discussing it. But anyways, that's where we came from. And that's kind of why we're here looking at it.
Okay, presumably you also went to other jurisdictions, because there are a lot of jurisdictions in the state that have gone
Yeah.
this direction, so
Yeah,
getting feedback and guidance from what's already in place,
yeah.
so.
And, you know, to a greater and lesser extent, they all rely on a couple of key elements, you know, this much of the development has to be reserved and deed restricted in some way for this kind of eligible occupant.
Mhm.
Craig points out that there's both workforce housing and affordable housing in this ordinance, and he's right about that. That was also something that was suggested to us or asked to be put in here. But when you do add up those units and you've only in a triplex development, that does only potentially leave one market rate unit. And so you can adjust this in a number of ways. You could say a certain percentage of units up to, or, you know, you've got to have 20% or whatever for affordable housing up to a certain number of units. When you get to 20 units, I'm making the numbers up, then you need to start layering in workforce housing as well on top of that and define that separately. That would be probably a way to do that. That way you're getting both affordable housing and workforce housing at some level. Rick makes the good point that, you know, it does have to be something the development community will be able to afford and do one way or another. Craig makes the point that he kind of agrees with the intent. It's the application that's the issue. And he makes also the public policy point. If the town's going to do this, it needs to do more than just a stick, and there should be a carrot. And what about density bonus? What about expedited reviews? And all of those things you see in other ordinances in one way or another. And so if the board's interested in adding carrots to what are frankly sticks or at least regulatory requirements, we can do that too.
Okay.
And the other thing that occurs to me is some communities do a more formalized outreach, you know, a draft, and then they mail it to everybody in town and say, before we take our next step on this, what do you think? We're getting something like that comment just by virtue of this draft on first reading, but the board may want to do more.
Okay. All righty. I just wanted to ask, in those, there are like two spots where the wording didn't make sense, and it was like there was something, either the wrong word or something left out. So under 1749-050, parentheses 3, the word sent.
It's probably, you're probably right. I mean,
I was just trying to understand the meaning.
Just, okay, let me, I'm working on 3 different pieces of paper here. Hang on.
Well, I thought about that, but
You need to look at my Jerry.
No, I had it in my hand and then can we move to a different? Maybe.
I think that's supposed to be percent.
Yeah,
it could.
I think Deanne's probably right.
Okay.
Okay, any other little edits?
And then the next 1749-060, also parentheses 3, middle of the paragraph, this allows made. And I'm not sure what was.
I'm not either.
Okay. Okay.
Jerry, I have it highlighted on mine. You want to
Okay. Sure. That can be our exercise, but
Sure.
I can fix, I can fix these things.
Okay.
There's also in the next paragraph down, 1749-070, in the top sentence, it says in the country. The short little line under the full line of the top sentence.
Okay.
I will own all of these little corrections, but
Sure. I just was trying to understand the intent, so, yeah, so start us off, do you want to start from the fill in the blank sections? Just one at a time. I did want to go into things that occurred to me under the definitions section, the AMI. So it's my understanding from talking to Sally Rush that Georgetown and all of Clear Creek County got lumped in with the Denver area when AMI is being calculated, and sometimes you get more accurate AMI figures if you go with what the state has calculated. So I was wondering if everybody would be okay with allowing either the AMI for the county or the AMI for the state.
Do you have figures that would provide an example of the difference between those two? Just add.
Off the top of my head, I don't,
Okay.
but
Could you make?
we can get them.
I mean, I'm just wondering
Sure.
how significantly different they might be.
Right. So, get numbers. Okay. And next, under the deed restrictions section, it addresses ownership and occupancy of units and may control the prices for sale units initially or upon resale. Should it also mention the restrictions for rents that can be charged?
Some ordinances do. That is another policy question.
Okay,
Because now you've entered into rent control,
right.
which is another, I won't call it another whole chapter,
Okay,
but it's a big, okay, if that's the case, then what rents are you going to set? And fair amount of litigation, mostly rising out of Telluride, on the ability of towns to set rates for rental properties. So it's a big step,
sure,
I will say.
sure.
But again, if I hear from the board that you want it drafted, then I can.
Okay, I had that in my mind when we were headed down this road, because, one of the big things that has been happening over the years is you got developers doing apartment buildings and they claim that it's going to be affordable, and then it winds up being anything but.
Sure. Is the board supportive of that? I mean, as we go through these big policy questions, I need to know.
Absolutely.
I need to know.
Yes, Deanne?
I'd like to see some, I get that the intent is to get worker bees in our hive. But I'd like to see some allowance for elderly, in case some of our older people want to downsize but stay in the community. Is there a way to slide that in someplace? I realize that's going to make it tricky because it's not 80% of earned income and 30 hours a week and things like that. But there should be some way that we can allow the people who are community members who have been here forever, and not newbies wanting to come in and retire here necessarily, although I don't know how you'd sort that out between the two. But there needs to be something about retired or pensioners or something.
I get, okay, point taken. So let's set that issue aside for the moment, but we were trying to figure out whether we need to add wording that restricts rents as well as sale prices. Is that something that you agree with or not?
I like it being forever held as a affordable house. I like that somebody can't just live in it a couple years and resell, so I like that.
Okay, but we've got two categories here at this point in time. We've got units that can be sold and owned, and then we've got an apartment which would, or a townhome, let's say, which could be rented. And the ordinance as it's been drafted doesn't really address any rent control provisions. Is that something you want to pursue or just go after the ownership piece? Yes, Paul.
I'm a little bit confused here because my understanding of affordable housing is with purchase of a unit.
Okay,
And so this whole rent control thing, that's kind of throwing me for a loop. How is Georgetown going to be a landlord?
No.
Property manager? And
Well-
determine what John Smith over there can charge for rent.
That's what some resort communities have ordinances that say if you're gonna be in the rental business, similar to if you're gonna be in the building houses business, you've gotta reserve this many units for rental rates that are affordable. And you're absolutely right that that's another whole social policy, another program and decision that now you're affecting the builders and developers of rental units as opposed to the builders and developers of for sale units. It's similar in the sense that the idea is that you're wanting to make both rental and ownership affordable, but they're affecting two rather distinct classes of development as you described. And it's, I will say that the regulating rental rates for affordability gets the attention of the courts and the legislature more and has. There's still room to do it and cities do it. But that's why it's kind of its own separate, each of these is a big policy question
right.
that you need to be behind or not, really, but before it moves too much further.
So Idaho Springs just recently did it with the property that used to be the football field. And there's a certain percentage of those new units will have to be rented to, available to employees of the school district. And
So who's doing the renting?
the owner of the property, but there's a deed restriction that requires them to do this.
So if I wanted to buy a deed restricted apartment,
Buy or rent.
but again, I go back to the
So-
deed restrictions in affordable housing. To me, it's purchasing the unit, purchasing the house.
Well,
Are you putting a restriction on the potential owner of that unit? Somewhere in here it says you have to be this is your primary residence too,
if you're purchasing it,
purchasing it.
right?
So does that mean he's purchasing it, and then gonna flip it and rent it? And now us, government, has to step in and determine what he can rent it for?
Well, but if he's purchasing a unit that's been designated as affordable housing, we should be.
He knows that.
To that piece of it. And if it is their permanent residence, I'm gonna open up Pandora's box even more. I would want to make sure that we're restricting their ability to even short-term rental it. So,
See, right now, we restrict short-term rentals in our respective wards, which is good, but we don't dictate what they can charge.
Right.
And I feel fine with that. This is starting to rub me the wrong way, getting
Okay.
into somebody else's business. Well, first of all, they're buying an affordable unit to live in. Why are they renting it?
Because they decide that they're gonna go visit grandma in Florida for 2 weeks on vacation. And we're such a hot commodity and it's their primary residence and they're gonna rent it out for a couple of weeks.
But now we can tell them what they can rent it for.
Well, if it's affordable housing, I don't think that's our intent. For them to be making income off of it. So if it's any kind of, if it draws in any income, then it shouldn't fall under the affordable housing. Of course, not in that broad term, because I wouldn't want to put somebody out of business because they're a mom and pop industry out of their house. Or they're making something that they're selling on Etsy.
Well, let me ask the fundamental question here is, do you want to, and what I'm hearing is yes, you want to require new development at some level, new residential development, to provide for a portion of that new residential development that is for sale. We'll get to rental in a minute. You know, I'm a one thing at a time person. It's the only way I can think, because I really do have limited brain capacity and I can't think about 4 things. So I can't do it.
Only 3 doors though.
Yeah, 3 doors. That's the first thing I guess every board member needs to weigh in on, because you'll get a lot of attention on this. So you all have to be kind of on the same page about, yes, we want a percentage of new developed units that are going to be sold for ownership to be reserved for affordable housing and deed restricted for that. And I do want to get back to Paul's question, which is as important, but is that true? Does anyone disagree with that?
No, this is our.
Okay.
I agree with that.
And roughly at what threshold level? Right now it's triplex. And so you can build a duplex and sell it for whatever you want. But if you want to build a triplex or 3 units in a little development, then a percentage of it has to be deed restricted. Is that the appropriate floor?
What if you're building multiple duplexes?
Well, as a part of the same development that you're getting approval for, it would be more than 3.
So once they build that 3rd unit, even though it's a duplex.
Yeah, I mean, if you get development approval for 3 duplexes, that's 6 units.
Okay, and 20% of them are gonna be affordable
Yeah.
housing.
If you come in with 1 lot at a time to get a duplex approved, you're below the threshold, and yes, people could work their way around some of that, but that's life. But that's the main rule.
I guess the question too is a triplex small enough?
Yeah,
You know, is that threshold low enough?
yeah.
Because the other thought I had is if you make it a quad, then the developers just can make triplexes in order to get around that,
Potentially.
you know? So it's like, what is the threshold?
We're gonna be full duplexes all over the place.
Well, you know, the market's going to react to what you do.
Yeah.
It just is.
Well, that's what we were discussing at our last meeting, when all of a sudden we have part of our historic residential district being blown up by what some people are thinking are larger houses on larger lots, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, we didn't think it was gonna look like this. And so now we're faced with that. So if we've got, and we have several duplexes along Clear Creek Drive that were built back in whenever, the 70s or something, and so I can see where an individual developer on several separate occasions could potentially build multiple duplexes and not fall within this affordable housing definition. And is that our intent?
Well, that's true, and I can try to draft around that a little bit, you know, and say, if it's under common ownership and the building permits are pulled within a total from first one to the last one within a period of 2 years, then it is considered, you know, I can draft around issues like that as we get a little closer to an actual draft. I mean, if that's also your intention, sure. I can do that. What I'm hearing though, to begin with, I'm just trying to nail the gel to the wall for you. It's my job. Which is, I'm hearing triplex. Yes, that's our floor. I'm hearing, make sure that's enforceable and people can't get around it. There will be leakage no matter how good a job I do, and I'm warning you about that. That's just how it is. That's the one thing I'm hearing. The second thing I'm hearing is affordability has to find a place for a definition, otherwise it's pointless to do it all. And that's fine. I guess the next question is the one Lynette raised and Paul responded to, which is, are we also going to apply an affordability component to units that are for rent? Now, the deed restricted affordable housing could always has to be owned by and lived in by persons that are affordable. So you don't, I think you don't have a rent problem with those deed restricted units. But the apartment complex isn't owner occupied. So is that an arena you want to add? And I'm hearing yes, and I'm hearing no.
Well, when you define it like that, that kind of separates it. You've got owner occupied, and then you've got the developer that builds specifically an apartment complex for rent.
Mhm.
To me, that's a different issue.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I would agree with that. If there's a way we can separate these two, so it doesn't muddy the waters, because we're gonna navigate through it, or let's put this rent control on owner occupied stuff in door number 3, and we'll deal with it later.
Fair enough.
Let's get through the meat and potatoes first.
I can do that.
Okay.
Um,
Deanne, you had your hand up at one point.
Yeah, I wanted to answer Paul's question that it's a deed restriction. So anybody that buys anything is completely aware that this is a condition of it. Just like if you buy a motor that's got a governor on it, you know that you have to stay within the parameters. It won't go past that. Well, this is the same thing. You've bought a piece of land. If you want to build anything more than a single family home, I'd like to see, but it's also, right now it's set up for a duplex, a 2-dwelling single building. It has this condition on it that you can't just build whatever you want and do with it whatever you want. And you know that going in, so it's not a problem.
Okay.
okay, as presently written, and I think maybe Craig even pointed it out, you've got, I'm looking at 1749-040, affordable housing and local housing requirements. So there's a distinction here. The first subsection 1 is some percent of the total number for people at between 80, a variety of people who are at least 80% income in Clear Creek County. So earning your income in Clear Creek County. And then you've got a percentage which can be a portion of the above. So you could say you satisfied a portion of them with door number 2. And door number 3, you can say, we're going to have someone else build these. For ease of administration, I guess I'd say that you pick an affordable range and say that's, it's got to be available deed restriction to persons earning not more than a given AMI, and that's affordable. And anyone that earns not more than that AMI can purchase, but and in addition to that, they're the ones who are eligible to purchase. Now, I can find an AMI number. Different cities define affordability differently, and so I'm not an expert in deciding what affordable will be here in Georgetown. But the policy question you have is, once you've decided on that number, do you also require those persons to be earning their income and living in Clear Creek County? Or not? Because affordable could be, I live here, I'm under the AMI, I live in the unit, but I don't, earn my income in Clear Creek County. I drive to Denver. Do you want to allow that or not? The way the ordinance is written, it's kind of a buffet because it says, number one is affordable in the county. Number two is just affordable. So do you want to have both of those things be true? It's got to be affordable and it's got to be deed restricted, not only to affordable persons, but persons that earn their income in the county.
I think we're trying to support our people in the county.
Yeah.
So
you really combine them. I mean, that's easier.
And that most people that live in Georgetown do not work in Georgetown. I used to live in Breckenridge. They did a study, something like 75% of the workers in Summit County do not live in Summit County.
because it's unaffordable.
That's not affordable.
But so we're encouraging people who to live here who can also work here.
So if I have a good job and a decent job is, I'm trying to buy an affordable unit here in Georgetown, but I work in Gillette.
Mhm.
So that cuts me out.
Under this rule, you could still buy a unit in Georgetown, you just wouldn't be able to
Affordable.
buy one of the town restricted
Deed
affordable.
restricted.
You'd be out on the free market the way you are now, I suppose. But you wouldn't get the assist, that the ordinance is providing. But that market wouldn't be open to you more accurately.
I would be amenable to making, so if you've got 20% or 21% of the units have to be affordable based on income, and then half of those units would need to actually be working in the county. To me, that seems like a compromise. We still would have we'd still have workforce housing. I'm not sure if there are enough jobs here to make sure that all of those units would be able to be occupied by county residences.
But doesn't that encourage the job market here if the affordable housing?
I'm not saying-
falls hand in hand,
Well,
or with the prices of gas, the way they continue, of course, we want to drive outside the county
Right.
for the job.
but you've got a lot, I just thoughts, yeah,
I know.
sure.
Rick's got a-
Yeah, Rich,
Before I make any decisions, first of all, it's getting in the rental business.
can you
It's very
speak up, please? Start over, please.
Getting in the rental business to me is very difficult, and that's a separate issue. The other thing is that how does it work? Like when Bighorn Crossing put all those apartments in, they seemed like they had reasonable startup rents. What are they charging now? And then what are, if Major Anderson are renting those places out, or the ones that are next to the Bighorn Crossing, what are they going for? And are they selling them all like condos, or are they actually apartments under one manager over at Bighorn Crossing? So I'd like to know a little more about how that works. And then is there another city that's fairly close by that has drafted an ordinance, and actually how has it worked for them? Because the football field's been sitting there for a couple of years not being used. And is it because of there's nothing being built there? Is it because of this affordable housing piece, or is it something else? I guess I would like, because it's obvious it's happening other places, and I would kind of like to know, is it working? Is it not working? How is it working?
Okay, so on on Digger Field, that property just was sold last year, which is why you don't see anything built yet. but they did have deed restrictions built in on in that sale agreement, so that a certain percentage had to be available for employees of the school district. And they were rent restricted so that those employees on their salaries could afford that rent. So that's the closest one that I know of. So, but we can find others if you want examples. But how do you feel about the difference between just having it be available and deed restricted, so for an income on an income basis versus also employment in the county?
I think that you could probably have both of those in the wording of the ordinance, and be able to at least throw a bone to each, whether it be income and I've lived here 20 years but haven't worked in the county either. But I'd rather see more folks buy units than rent them, because it's a different mentality when you own your own spot.
Sure.
I have a question too. I remember when I was in Brush, PUDs, planned unit developments, open up opportunities in order to do mixed things and zonings, everything else. But one thing that was in there, and maybe Jerry's more familiar, and I'm just bringing this as just an idea. What if you have a developer who can't afford to do this? The wants to do a 50-unit apartment complex, and if we are talking about 20%, it's too restrictive for him to even develop. So what made me think about it is, in a PUD, there's typically a way out where they can buy out, like a fee in lieu of. If you know what I'm talking about, Jerry?
I do. That's really not a PUD answer. Instead, it's a satisfy the requirement with other units answer that's in this draft, actually. But PUD doesn't get you there.
No, I'm not suggesting PUD.
Okay.
I remembered that if a developer was able to pay a fee in lieu of an exchange so that he can build more market rate, in order to make ends meet to make the development work. I wonder if that is something to consider too.
We can put it on the list.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And are we doing it, or?
Well, while people chew on that idea, Deanne?
We've got to keep in mind that Georgetown is a special situation. We've got the National Historic Landmark District designation. We've got a really good set of books for the DRC to keep it in keeping with its mining heritage and stuff. And we have to realize that the only way we can keep that is to be aware of what all of these sorts of new buildings and things are going to do to it. Consequently, we don't have to do anything. And if it isn't ideal, wonderful would be to be able to build housing for everyone, but we don't have to. We have to remember our historic heritage and guard that, because this is, we can't let some developer come in and throw some money at our regulations and change them. That's not okay. We're setting this up so that it will protect the people who are already here, keep our businesses having available workforce, and also keeping our look feel the same. That's the big deal about the square footage of land to size of building thing that we're going to look at in a little while. We don't have to build anything. And if they aren't willing to comply with what we want, then they don't need to be here. You know, we don't want just random developers coming in and, you know, building McMansions and horrible looking little square boxy piles of apartments. We need to keep this pure.
Okay,
Well, remembering that the town doesn't own the property that gets developed. So if I have 5 acres here in town, one thing the town can't do is say, you may never develop this because we don't want you to, since the town isn't the owner. So the game the town is, you know, the arena the town can work in is, once you've allowed residential zoning in a given area, you have to allow that residential zoning, but you can layer on requirements.
Exactly.
Which is what we're trying to do here. The more I look at this ordinance, the more I will say, I'm sorry that it's got these blanks in it. Was a working draft that, for whatever reason, either I sent the wrong version in or I misunderstood its function. But with that in mind, what I'm trying to do here is put down a series of questions to be able to revise it. And I think I've got a grip. First, what I think I'm hearing is, at the moment, a working number would be 21%. It has to be affordable, and that's 21% of any development over at triplex and greater. I've heard that much. See if you can make sure there isn't leakage of people developing 4 triplexes or 4 duplexes. That's Mary Smith's question, is a good one. And there will be a limit to how much I can do that, but yes. The next thing I hear is that of that number, some amount needs to be further restricted, not additional, but some carve out of the 21% for persons living in the county. So you've got affordability, just affordability, and then you're done. I can live anywhere I like, but I can't make more than 120% of AMI or whatever the number is. But then half of those units, half of the 21% for working numbers here, for people that live or work in the county.
well, obviously they live.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're just working here.
Yeah, work in the county, excuse me. Thank you. Yeah, if they, it's got to be owner occupied. Why don't they live in here? They may or may not be working here.
Yes, they.
I can plug that in. The next thing I've got is, what is the AMI? And I'll tell you that I don't see any affordable ordinances saying that affordability is more than 120% of AMI. Because, you know, if you're making 200% of AMI, you probably don't need to be in this program. You can probably afford something else. So that's the next thing I've put down. The thing after that, that is a question really that Rick asked was, can you satisfy that requirement? And it's kind of toward the bottom of the first page, I guess. Can you offer a percentage of affordable housing to be built by somebody else or other housing? Can you like acquire housing that's out there? Units that are there right now, and say, I'll deed restrict those 5 units that already exist. They've been here for 20 years. I'll deed restrict them. If my development requires me to build 4 affordable units, given the numbers, for example, instead of doing that, I want to build market rate on my land, but I will purchase and deed restrict 4 affordable units in town. Is that all right? The net result is the same. It does mean that some of your housing stock moves from unaffordable to affordable, but that's the goal. That's more carrots, I think. And I do believe that the pushback you're going to get is this makes small projects unaffordable. And to the extent you can give people options, I really think you should consider it. Are there objections to some such thing?
I have a question about,
Okay.
maybe I'm not understanding this, but what's 21% of a triplex if one unit is 33%?
One bedroom, you can rent out that bedroom. No.
Josh, John's right.
I know, the
Down
math
there,
doesn't
yeah.
work, so.
The math has to work. Yeah. Yeah.
5 units, whatever.
You could say one third and then you round up or down depending, you know, I mean,
Or jump up to a fourplex and do 25%.
yeah.
Yeah, but 25% is.
Or create a table.
If you were to look at a larger.
And then adjust it. I mean, I have a problem. I've lived in rent control places, unfortunately. And they really have a hard time working.
I've seen that. I was just gonna say, I agree with you. I've seen the bad and the ugly with rent control.
So I'm. Housing for people. I'm just worried that like well, as a builder, I wouldn't approach a triplex if I had to give away one unit. I would just say, forget it. I'd go to some other community and build. So we aren't getting housing.
That's okay, though.
It is okay. Unfortunately,
It doesn't solve our problem.
we still need to build units.
Lack of housing, affordable housing.
So, and I'm really trying to understand this. And I think it's a good attempt, but my brain isn't wrapping it around some of this stuff. Very well, and I apologize.
Well, John asked a fundamental question, which is, on the numbers, almost forget what's there. What do you want? What policy do you think that you can support with your development community? Is it a third? And I'll figure out the language around the percentage, but is it a third of a new development, which is more or less the going in theory here? The numbers don't work really well. Is it a quarter? Is it a third? Is it a quarter until you get to 20 units and then it's a third? You know, you can mix and match a whole lot of different ways.
Planning Commission's recommending 20%. I don't think we had a problem with 20%. There is another problem with the math to get to 20%.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you're saying. If you're building a smaller, it might be 25 until you make that magic number and then it goes to 20%.
I'll put down 20% for now.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to see another draft.
Yeah.
I didn't think I got an answer to can you purchase existing units and deed restrict them and build the heck out of your market rate brand new development and satisfy your requirement?
Yes.
I don't see why not.
I don't see why not either.
Jack thinks of that?
So I'm just making sure I heard that because I didn't catch it a second ago. If a developer wants to build a complex, 20 units, but then decides to buy units from other place and make those deed restricted, that would still meet the requirement.
That's what Scott said yes to.
That's common.
So that means
I
that
just think-
you're looking to 100% market rate.
Yeah.
In order to fulfill that, I'm gonna go buy these 3 houses over here.
Yeah,
And
you want to do that.
And deed restrictive.
Or you have 2 deed restricted units in your new development and you buy one
to fulfill that.
to fulfill the remaining requirement. We don't care.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying a specific location, we just
Yeah.
go somewhere in Georgetown.
And that brings me to the draft at 1749-050, top of the page. And all of this language is really written, and I did copy this, I forget from who, I think it was somewhere in Grand County, might have been Pickett County. But all this is to not have all the affordable units over there in that one part of town on that side of the tracks, kind of thing,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Do you care?
Yes.
Because in this community, that may or may not be an issue. Especially if you can buy the units elsewhere and deed restrict them, then that means you can build all the good units on the quote, good side of the tracks if you want. So they work a little bit at cross purposes. This section's really designed for probably a larger development. And the idea is, okay, you got the good there's 3 buildings,
Mhm.
3, multiplex buildings. One of them is all affordable. And this says, no, it's got to be integrated. Developers will say, well, the nature of the affordable units is that the nature of the quality of the construction might be different. And it's real hard for me to sprinkle an affordable unit into the middle of this other building potentially. What do you think about that? Deanne's got a question.
Yes, Deanne?
We have traditionally had the miners mixed in with the mine owners, mixed in with the Hamels. All through our history, it's all been, I don't know what I want to call it, but mixed together. And I think it's important to keep this. If this developer is going to give our lesser earning people a lower standard of living because of how he builds the unit, it's not okay. It has to be all the same or it doesn't count. It's not okay to cherry pick. And we do need the affordables in with the regulars.
And to the extent the developer chose to build the affordable units within the same development, probably yes. But to the extent, and I've heard support for it, to the extent the developer wants to say, no, I'm going to buy existing units somewhere. They don't all have to be in the same place. They could be sprinkled around. It doesn't, what you've said is it doesn't matter. We want the net result to be, if you've got a 20, let's see, what's 20%. If you've got 100 unit development, we want to see, round numbers. We want to see 20 units somewhere. You can buy some that exist and kind of rehab them, make them affordable. You can build some within your development, but in the end, we want to see them somewhere.
They need to be mixed together. It's not okay to have a projects down on the south side of the tracks.
And let's remember, I put this section in, but in real life in
We may not.
Georgetown, the town doesn't have such large parcels that you're going to see that are built, beyond Bighorn, and that's built up. You're just not going to see. It's going to be a lot of little infill guys, mostly.
Yeah, but if you had a development where the developer was building lots. And whatever the numbers.
Yeah.
Would we want, if 4 units end up being affordable, do we want all those 4 units in that same building, or would we want them dispersed throughout the development?
That's exactly the question, and you see what some communities have done this year.
And I would like to see them dispersed. I would like to see them spread out throughout the development.
If in same development, then disperse.
And if they're buying something else, then we've already got that, so.
Okay.
I think the biggest
I like
challenge
that.
too, though, is when you're thinking about a multi-family housing development of 40 apartments, he's going to build this, and we're saying we want to deed restrict that to make sure that a portion of it can be for affordable housing or workforce housing or whatever we're calling that. Then if the developer has an option to buy that somewhere else, it's hard to buy apartments because they're not for sale. They're all units. It's like a managed company has that. So that does make it a challenge. I mean, you could buy houses, but houses are expensive. You just can't buy a home for 200,000 here. I mean, I have a friend right now looking for a house, and one popped up 1,500 square feet, and they're asking almost 800,000 for it, and it's nothing nice. And so it's like it still brings a challenge to the table. Where's that person going to buy affordable units, or buying that at top rate to turn them into affordable units? It's another sticky subject.
I've got actually pretty good notes. Now let me return to if you don't mind me this is the only way we're going to make progress.
Please do.
The only way. If you don't mind me.
I'm sorry.
Sorry?
We lost one of our selectmen.
Rich had to go.
Rich.
Obviously, so exciting.
I think I've got a grid for the next ordinance, and what I think I'd like to do is create an outline of the ordinance, because I think the words are getting in the way a little bit. The blanks don't help, and I own that. But let me create an outline that sort of says what I think I've heard. And that means 2 weeks from now, we'll have to grind through that outline, but I think it'll be easier to confirm your choices. Then I can go nuts and actually write it up in a better form.
Under your 050 zone, can you strike the mobile home part in parentheses
Yeah,
too? Because
yeah.
that doesn't apply to us, I can't.
Yeah, I don't know.
See.
I don't know where that,
So let's not even. break
yeah,
the flag.
I don't know where that came from, yeah. The deed restriction, I know how to write that. That's easy. We've already talked about eligible applicants. And the 080 is the business that you can buy other units and satisfy, you can buy other units, satisfy the requirement that way. Now, I kind of understand the structure. Let's remember that the affordability idea we came to was 20% of new construction has to be affordable per the definition, and half of that must be the deed restriction must ensure that it's for persons working in the county.
Well, I don't know that we came to a
Well-
consensus on that half.
We didn't, yeah, but that's,
That's what I proposed, and Mary thought a different,
and well,
and we didn't hear it, anybody else.
so what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna put down that number, understanding that when you see the outline, if we're lucky, the 80% of the work will be done, and you can argue about whether it should be 50% or 60, which is a whole lot easier argument to have than the one we just worked our way through. I mean, this hard work, there's no question. Now let me though return to Paul's question about rental, because I do want to get feedback from that. We could certainly create another ordinance or chapter that says, all right, to the extent you're developing units for rental past a certain threshold, then 20% have to be deed restricted for rentals to persons at this AMI, and I'll have to key in sort of the how you restrict rentals deed restriction wise to AMI, and there are systems out there. I just don't, I know they exist because we have rent control around. And of that, 50% have to be, you know, local workers or whatever. But, you know, we can sort of mirror this approach, but it is a different part of the private market. And it's clear that you're regulating the private market just on the new construction and the ownership. Is there support or not for regulating the component of the private market that is rentals, that are new development for rent, not owner occupied homes, but new development, if you're going to build an apartment building, and we can define it that way.
Yes.
Is there support for that? There's one.
Yeah, like to keep them separate though.
Okay, yeah,
As good as possible, right?
yeah.
Right.
I think probably ought to be,
Restriction for ownership
I see Dan's got a question.
and the deed restriction for rentals.
Correct. We can certainly keep them separate, and I'd be inclined to have two separate ordinances, understanding that the persons that show up on this and are concerned may feel differently about those two categories. One may have the effect of dragging the other one down, and you want them to kind of live on their own.
Okay.
All right, Deanne, what's your point on rentals?
That's exactly where I was going. If this is new construction and intended to be rentals from the get-go, not changed after somebody's lived there for a while, it needs to have a higher percentage than just 20. Because more of our worker bees rent when they first get here. And so there needs to be a place for them available. And so instead of 20%, it should be 30 or 40%. And if that scares away the builder, dems the brakes. I really have no, I think Georgetown's special, and we have to be careful what happens. Consequently, if it's for rentals, at least there has to be a higher percentage for the affordableness.
So what I will do is I'll design an outline on the rental side, just like I'll do for the ownership side. And it'll either have numbers in it or blanks with percentages. There are 7 of you talking about numbers. And so there's going to have to be a majority of you that decide on that number. And there quite likely will be a range of opinions, and I'm sure there'll be a motion that will pass with a majority that picks a number. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
I think I have as much as we can productively create in one night.
Okay.
Thank you.
So at this point, do we need a motion to,
Motion to continue consideration of ordinance number 1 until the next meeting. And
okay,
at the next meeting, I'll come back to you with an outline.
So
Some says John.
okay, it's been moved and seconded to continue first reading until our next meeting. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right. Good work. Ordinance number 2, series 2023 for ADUs, an ordinance amending chapter 13.20 of Title 13 of the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning service line requirements for accessory dwelling units.
And this is a little simpler, happily, because you'll recall there was discussion about this in the meeting. I think Craig was here as well. And what you see in this ordinance, the lowercase language at the beginning of section 1, that says section 1320.030 is amended. The first sentence is really what's there now. Just a separate service line provided for every residence unless otherwise approved by the Public Works Director. What this does is make clear that ADUs are scooped into that. So if you've got an ADU in the backyard, it's got to have a separate service line that has to be separately metered. Goes on to say, what about ADUs that are in existence? If they're in existence as of, it'd be the date you pick, probably the effective date of the ordinance or future date. If they're served by the same service line, as may well be true around town. Single line, somebody's grafted on the ADU into the service line on the property. Now it's going out to the street, and your Public Works Director told you the issues that he sees with those. It's got to be brought in compliance by, and you told me pick a date, and so I picked a date that's what, 6 or 8 months out, unless Public Works Director gets a certificate from an engineer, and that where the engineer can say, yeah, the two lines are married together on the property, but they're sized appropriately, and there's a reasonable, gradient from the ADU that's not going to clog up, and so it's okay. So that's what this does. So what do you think? This is first reading, right?
Correct.
And the only blank here is, of course, the date for what amounts to the not so much the grandfather clause, but if you're in existence now, this rule applies to you, but you've got until September to come into compliance. For development that hasn't happened yet, an ADU that hasn't been built yet, you've just got to build your separate line. So that's what it requires.
what about not having a tap fee on this, but just an increase in the single tap?
Yeah.
Which would reduce the cost of that ADU, as long as, like going with the engineering, but just not charge a tap fee. You're re-tapping with a bigger line to get to a single piece of property, and then double metering.
Fair question. I didn't address this here. I know it came up a little bit in the discussion, but I didn't have a direction to address it. Today, I think if you were Public Works Director, you'd say if you're adding a house, that's a tap. But it's fair for the board to decide that that's not a tap. And that's easy enough to write. If you tell me to do that, I can add that.
We got a water guy right there that's our expert.
How much is the tap?
What
We were under it significantly.
what would be the problem with just increasing the tap from 3/4 inch to 1 inch or whatnot?
You get better flow. I mean, that's the only, you would be accessing, good gallon per minute, more than somebody else. But I don't think we have a supply issue.
So as far as the ADU is concerned,
shouldn't be an issue, especially,
Probably a smaller unit.
would it be, and then what's the purpose of the ADU? Is it rental or is it just a man cave, or a shed?
Well, I mean, if it's an ADU, if it's used as an ADU and one of the ADUs that's. Then it's, put it this way, it's capable of being lived in.
Sure.
By a family,
Right.
and it's not an STR, it's just an ADU, it's capable of being lived in by a family year round.
Got it.
And on any given month, day, on any given unit, it might be a man cave for,
Yeah.
if your wife kicks you out and says, you're in the man cave for the next 6 months,
And you
buddy.
call it a doghouse, Rob.
Doghouse.
Yes.
But once it's a residence and has a building permit, occupancy permit for a residence, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So your policy question, which John raises, is, yes, but is it enough to require them to have separate lines? Do we need to require that they pay the freight for another residence?
Well, in terms of, the town's pocketbook and how the revenue goes, well, should I ask?
No, please.
Oh,
No, please go right, that's fair. Fair shot.
you may be able to, instead of getting around that tap fee, just increase the EQRs.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, I mean, and if you've got, if everybody else is a 3/4 line, or if your main dwelling has a 3/4 line and you're putting in an inch line, well, then, yeah, your EQRs are gonna reflect that.
But what we're trying to do is provide more housing at a lower cost for the people to create that housing.
Yeah,
And if you've got $40,000 worth of initial cost for 2 taps,
yeah, lower the barriers to entry.
that would slow that process considerably. That's what I'm thinking.
John, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Are you talking on existing homes with ADUs, not new construction have ADUs, correct?
This would be any ADU, new or existing, coming in compliance with our ADU
Because
on
our,
a single piece of property.
okay, because our, right now, tap fees on a new building, your tap fee is, you figure out your
Right.
EQR, and your tap fee uses that multiplier, like it would on your billing, so I can see on existing ones to not create a hardship for existing owners that have one and didn't know or
Right.
whatever, but on people building new homes with ADUs, completely new, then I think that should still be.
Would they just have one tap if they're building a new house, just bring it in with a one larger line? So it'd be one tap fee for
Well,
ADU on a single property.
This section would apply. It would require a separate line. It would require
Unless an engineer looks
a
at it,
separate line.
but an engineer could look at it and assess.
Yes.
But so if you're building a new ADU, you're building a new property with a new ADU. Isn't there a way that you could bring in your water supply with a larger pipe and not, and provide the water required for both?
With a higher EQR.
EQR and not down.
Yes, but your EQR also would be applied towards your development fee, not just your monthly water bill.
And
Okay.
one of
Yeah.
the purposes of those development fees is to build up that fund that would cover the cost of plant replacement when it reaches obsolescence.
Mhm.
And the more residences you have tapping in, whether it's by a shared line or separate, each one is charged that based on how much we're calculating, its impact on our system and how much it's going to cost to replace either or both plants.
So how do we reach the compromise so that if we're looking at, let's look at an ADU for complete family unit, okay? Let's not go into affordable housing.
Right.
Rentals, whatever. Okay? How can you, and I know we'll never know this when people are building, it doesn't make any difference, but how can we make that compromise so that it's not costing them, putting them out of business by declaring or by creating that ADU and still bring in the right water supply?
One thing that you want to probably consider is that there's, a size limitation on this ADU. Just because the existing structure is already taking up a lot of the property, which would be floor area ratio. So
It's
it's gonna be a really small place. It might just be one bedroom.
Exactly.
So you might not have,
Our existing ADUs are now anyway.
right, it might not have a family, or it might just be one person or two.
It could be an adult child, or it could be the in-law apartment, or, whatever kind of thing.
So I'm not thinking about it in this, like a second home type of thing, unless the lot is gigantic or something. Because it's pretty restricted. I'm assuming the water use would be restricted a little bit as well. That's all.
One
But if
point,
you're bringing it to your line, then you're not restricting your.
I was only going up 25% with from 3/4 to a 1-inch line. Is it 25% or it's actually a little bit more, 30% or something, right?
It's a little bit more like 30, 30%.
Sorry. So it's not a whole lot more. It's still a restricted pipeline. You're not gonna have, pool parties at the second house.
Would that be something that we would want to kick back and make sure that anyone, for new builds, anyone building an ADU, it can only be a one bedroom or whichever.
Just have a reasonable EQR. So, what do we give, 9 for most people? So
Or
you have,
it's the two tab.
So a single family home with a ADU is 1.9.
EQR.
AQR.
EQR.
And when someone wants to build a single family home and an accessory dwelling unit on that lot, do we charge 2 cap fees?
No,
We don't.
if they've got, if this single tap is sufficient, if
Okay.
that's determined, then it is the development fee times 1.9.
Okay, but so today, if I wanted to do that, I could actually, before this ordinance gets adopted, I could build a new house and ADU with a single physical service line. Now,
But charged at,
charged at 1.9 and fine, but remember what Ryan, Public Works Director, Ryan, right, Ryan?
Right.
Yeah.
I said the other night, which is, okay, for existing units that have got a single line, this dual line requirement could be waived if there's an engineer. But for new construction, I believe he was, and I feel I should represent him, I guess, or his point of view, which is we need a separate line for new, if it's going to be a separate residence, it needs to be a separate water and sewer line. If you can either support that or not, but I wanted to make sure, as written right now, it says separate lines for everything. But if you're in existence now, we'll have an engineer look at it and probably, but it really presently requires separate lines. We may or may not be doing that out there in the world or in town, but that's what the requirement is now. And you heard what Ryan had to say about new construction. So this getting an engineer certificate was really just a Band-Aid for existing EDUs. And I thought it was an appropriate Band-Aid too, because some may work and some may not. But on a kind of going forward new construction basis, what rule do you want to use? I think I've heard Mary say you're covered money-wise because the charge is 1.9, so you're getting
on new ones.
you're getting a good fee. So
That's a single tap, 1.9.
Yes.
single tap 1.9, so it's close enough.
Yeah, that's fair. If you use Ryan's, you'd have 1.9 and 1.9.
You have 1 to 1.
Well, you'd have 1 and 1.
You'd
Or
have-
just 1 and 1.
Yeah, a total of 2.
Yeah, you'd have 1 and 1, but just two taps.
But you would be paying the extra tap fee of
Yeah.
whatever it is, 25,000 or something.
Yeah.
It's total for both is right around 14,000.
Okay.
For water.
So we are allowing a single tap for
new ADU?
Now,
Yes, right now. Well, there's one that has already begun, so yes,
yeah.
but being charged at 1.9.
So I'll stop representing poor Ryan, but he asked the fair question, and I'm not sure that, clearly this ordinance doesn't change what's on the books, which is new construction, each house, ADU or otherwise, got to have a separate line. What we're kind of learning is that within the ADU world, maybe that's more than you need to require. Now's the time, and in this ordinance would be the place to lighten up on that, and we can easily do that in the same way we've done it, when you think about it, for existing ADUs. So do you want to extend that rule? What I'm hearing is on the money side, you're not going to lose a lot, because the difference between 1.9 and 2 is not much at all. It's really just the engineering and design side. If Ryan were here, he'd say, well, if it's new construction, why should we deliberately construct things that might be a problem later in life?
I have a question.
I don't know. Yeah.
So in the research, I was able to contact plumbers, engineers, and building inspectors, and to try to figure out so we create an appropriate, and in fact, I've actually got Bob Orsatti trying to create a flow chart to help determine what this would look like. Yeah.
Yeah, I caught that too.
Or whatever you call it, a process chart. Yeah. So it gives us guidance of saying, if it's a 5-bedroom home, it needs a 1-inch line. And, that would be sufficient. We need some engineering to give us guidance, as opposed to just saying we need separate lines. And, it's not simple. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were saying, I think the trump card every time was an engineer assess this, new, existing, or whatever, if it's a house that has, a garage and they want to convert it. So it's kind of new, but kind of old. So we had 3 different examples, but the trump card would be engineer, assess this, unless we can create a chart that gives us guidance of saying, if it's new construction, and I like what Ryan was suggesting is you should have separate lines, except if you're willing to get an engineer to assess this, and the engineer is going to put his stamp on the line to say, yes, your 4-bedroom home is sufficient to add an ADU to that. That 3/4-inch line is sufficient. But I want the engineer to put his stamp on there to tell me that. So that kind of would trump the standard of separate lines. So I'm okay with separate lines. I like the fact that we have expertise giving us that, okay, we can look at that. So that was the rationale behind it.
So it's separate lines or an engineer that says it's okay.
That's fine.
All right.
I can broaden the language of the ordinance to do that.
As far as the time frame for bringing existing into compliance, I prefer a little bit more lenience. I mean, none of this is cheap. Either an engineer evaluation, which can take a while if, engineers are all backed up, which when I left the county, they were. So it could take a while, or just getting that new tap put in. That's not going to be small dollars either. So I prefer more like a year at minimum to bring the others into compliance. Yeah.
What were we suggesting for?
6 months.
Oh.
6 months, I think, is too short.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. So if someone has an existing and it's, I'm thinking one is 35 years right now that came online, that came in my office and says he wants to. It's 35-year-old ADU. And are we saying he has to come up to compliance to the standard, meaning an engineer should assess this to make sure it's sufficient, or he has to get separate lines?
Within a year.
Yeah.
Within a year, okay.
That's fair.
Okay. And new construction can have a single line so long as it's accompanied by an engineer's certificate to the same effect.
As far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned, sure.
I mean, do we have a lot of these going up? Or is it just something?
The trend is moving this direction.
It is.
Heavily across the state.
Oh, all right.
I think we counted 40. Some are recognized, some are suspected.
In Georgetown, 40?
Yes, Ryan did a count and I did a count. And that's pretty much where we came in down 40.
Including mine.
I talked about twos last week.
Yes, yours comes up on the recognized list.
I got 2 meters.
Yes. You're in compliance.
And it drives the rental prices down.
I'd like to see existing put in, grandfathered in, and that we start from whatever date we start from, but anything prior to that, obviously, it's been sitting around working for all this time. I'm thinking about the thing Rick just said about 35 years or something. I would rather see, just in order to be kind to our existing owners, that it be grandfathered in, and that absolves us with a lot of this horsing around and limits on time to catch up and all of that.
There were a lot of adherence to building codes 35 years ago. I gotta tell you, there's a family in town, and we remain nameless, but they put their water lines right on top of their sewer lines. So I gotta tell you,
And an engineer, when looking at that, as required by this ordinance, would say,
no,
no.
So, I mean, in a way, I somewhat sympathize with all the existing, however, not all of the existing were done with legal permits, and I mean, if
Health and safety.
Well,
For
then
help-
call it, then say, all the existing that were legally done, or something like that. But
Well,
I'd really like to see some grandfathering here.
Well, honestly, this ordinance does have that by saying, if you're in existence, you've got a year to either create a separate line or get an engineer to say that your line is all right. If you can't do that, then the board has, I think, the right to insist that the line be made separate for public safety. And again, at some point, I'll suggest a motion and you can vote on it and we'll see if it passes by that magic majority. The motion I would suggest.
It seems like if the property doesn't change hands, it should be allowed to be grandfathered in. But anytime it gets sold or even gifted over to a relative or something, then is the time to do all the catch it up to standards thing.
Dan, if you start tying it to sales, you're running the risk of messing up somebody's sale of the property. I would rather set this in motion, set dates. It takes effect when the ordinance is approved on second reading, and then they have a specific amount of time to bring things into compliance and not tie it to transfer of ownership. I think that just makes the sale of a property really messy and.
Okay, that's a fair point, but let's put the deadline for existing out further than a year, make it 2 years or even 5. It needs to be a reasonable time, because everything right now is going nuts by increasing inflation wise and the like, and everybody is hurting, even the people who are relatively well off. And I would really like to see us be kind to our existing citizens.
Can I suggest this at 7:45? My suggestion would be, let me suggest a motion. And we get that on the table, and then persons can make motions to amend that overall structure by changing dates, numbers. And we can try amendments out, and amendments will either pass or fail, and when we're done with all the amendments, then we'll be done. How about that?
Works for me.
Okay,
A proper motion would be the adoption of ordinance number 2, the series 2023 on first reading with the following changes. Insert in the blank where it says existing ADUs as of blank 2023, insert effective date of this ordinance. Add a new sentence that new single family residences built to and accompanied by an ADU may be served by single lines if receiving a certificate from a registered professional engineer attesting that the shared service line or lines are designed and installed in a manner which provide adequate, safe, and sanitary service. And lastly, replace the reference to September 30, 2023 with 1 year from the effective date of this ordinance.
So
Second.
There's a motion to second. Are there amendments? Hearing none.
okay. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
I,
Opposed?
Opposed, not enough time on that date, and I'd really like to see grandfathering.
Well, one thing you can do is offer an amendment. That's how it works.
Okay.
Right? It's up to you.
Did Rob second?
Rob did.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, next we have ordinance number 3, series 2023, and this is also a first reading of that. An ordinance amending Title 3 of the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning the Georgetown lodging tax.
Both Rick and I have the staff report on this. As you know, there is also an executive session, which I want to give you further, just advice on and whatnot. I can tell you that, shall I do this or do you want to? Because I want to hand off to Rick in a minute.
I talk on that, so.
I need a break, but I can do this. As the board knows, there's your lodging tax is in place. You adopted, the voters approved it. You adopted first and second reading a fairly short lodging tax. Various persons have said, gosh, that isn't a lodging tax. I will tell you, I vehemently disagree. There's been a lot of research done by a lot of people since that time. And we have looked at, and I've looked at 30 different lodging taxes around the state. We've done a lot of research. The purpose of this ordinance really is a couple-fold. It's to mirror longer ordinances that exist out there that displace county lodging taxes. And we did a little study and found there are more than this, but we found 3 different counties where there are municipalities in those counties that dislodge, whose lodging taxes dislodge the, dislodge. There you go. Displace, thank you. The county lodging tax and the Department of Revenue recognizes that. What I did was I looked at for this particular case, I looked at the town of Telluride and the city of Cortez. Telluride displaces San Miguel, Cortez displaces Montezuma County's lodging tax, and the DOR respects that displacement. And Cortez was shorter, Telluride is really long, and I ended up with material from both and tried to kind of come in the middle. But I will tell you that after having done that, while it reads longer, a little more like those, it did not change fundamentally what your current ordinances, which is a sales tax on lodging services, which is lodging tax. A sales tax on a specific good or service, and I know you all know this, but really just for the record, is also an excise tax, because an excise tax is a narrow sales tax. That if I want to have an excise tax just on Diet Pepsis and the sale of them, that's an excise tax. If I want to have an excise tax on retail, or on a sales tax on retail, that's a general retail tax. But it still is a sales tax, And it's still a lodging tax, any way you slice it. But so what I did was I added material. If that makes people feel better, great. And there's some material in kind of administration. I added a fair amount of power for the town treasurer in administering the tax, and that's all good. I mean, it gives more structure to the administration of the tax. I added something that some ordinances don't have, which is this first section, purpose and intent. That's new. And on second reading, I might even pump it up a little more. But this tells the story that the town has been saying. That the intention here is an excise tax and describing what that is. And the intention is it's imposed on the customer, it's collected by the vendor, and your intent is to adopt this tax as a lodging tax within the meaning of that citation, which is the county lodging tax section, which this tax will displace. And that's, I'm embracing that, and I just want people to know that that's what we're doing here. So that's the structure of this. There are a couple blanks over on 030 that should reference the town's existing 4.5 general retail tax. We don't have a date, Mary, for 20th day of the month over on 3.20.05.
Excuse me, Jerry, on the copy that I had sent you, like in that section, the 050, that last sentence, can you strike that? Because I don't even know. May retain.
That's the vendor fee. Do we allow a vendor fee on our general sales tax?
Yes.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we don't really need
No.
that vendor fine. We can delete that. That edit came before the hit the packet is the problem.
No, I know.
Okay.
I've got some more highlighted stuff.
Okay. And if you can reserve to some extent, we can do a little more work on second reading, if you don't mind.
That's
It's up
fine.
to you. But in any event, that's the structure of this ordinance. That's the purpose. Beyond it is to just reinforce what you have already done. And obviously we've got longer dialogue with the county and others, and we work hard at trying to reach, an accommodation with them. What ordinance adopted this originally, Jen?
Was ordinance
5.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got that. When you're ready, I'll help you do a motion on first reading as I did the other one.
Yeah.
But I know Rick wants to probably give you some.
I thought it was
background.
number 7. You sure?
I have it right there.
She'll look it up.
No, 5. You're right. Thank you.
Rick, what would you like to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job. Jerry and I have spent so much time thinking through this. And in the action item, there's a summary to kind of help you understand or remember, remind, reflect of how we got here. And the intent was from the very beginning, from the the Business Promotions Commission. They were very sensitive. They did not want to add a double tax. A double tax would have been clearly an occupation tax. Both sides could have been able to do that. We even took much time discussing it in executive session, and that's what we landed was a lodging tax. And so we'll go and talk more in executive session even tonight about that. But I like this. Jerry and I spent a lot of time looking at these other ordinances, and it's very clear, even from the Department of Revenue, that they would agree that ours is a lodging tax. And it's even shored up more by adopting some of the amendments of this. And I think we're in solid territory now.
Has the county come around a little bit?
And we're talking more in exec session about
Sure.
what we've learned.
Yes, Deanne?
At our last meeting, Jerry was going to contact the state and get some information there. What's the result of that?
I did contact them. The board got a confidential memorandum from me. You got a copy of it. And I'm going to talk more about that in the executive session.
I didn't
my-
see one.
Well, I'll describe it in exec session. It was just a half a page. So I'll cover it fully during that session. I can suggest a motion, but are we ready for one?
Go ahead.
An objection. I'm concerned when we're using the term excise tax, and I just think that we can try to simplify the language and not throw in more ways to say it's a sales on lodging. It's a lodging sales tax. And so there's a couple of points in the ordinance where we're saying it's an excise tax, unless it clearly spells it out in the Colorado Revised Statutes that's listed under .010 on the first page. And I'll, not to minimize this, but when I Google excise tax, it says excise taxes are usually applied on a per unit basis instead of as a percentage of the purchase price. For instance, cigarette excise taxes are calculated, blah, 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 or gasoline excise tax. And there, it's not like how that differs from a sales tax. Or there's one it's known as a hidden tax. And I realize this is only Google, but people are going to look at it like that. And let's just keep the language simple. It's a sales tax on lodging. It's a sales tax on lodging. We keep throwing in different words, making the semantics, and I'm uncomfortable with that.
Could we get in trouble by saying such? No, we
Why
can't and
it's
don't.
all sales tax?
All right, well, let me respond to that. First, most of the vast majority, not all, of the lodging taxes of municipalities out there that do the displacing of the county taxes begin by saying there's hereby imposed an excise tax on the sale of lodging services. So I'm very open about the fact I'm trying to mirror that to make this argument good for you. That's why I'm using the term, number one. Number two, there's case law in Colorado that is what I think a reviewing court would have to look at. And that's the case I've described here, the 1938 case. I've got a newer one that says the same thing, that says, an excise tax is a sales tax. And because if it weren't for the fact that 2/3 of the cities out there with lodging taxes, for whatever reason, good or bad, call them excise taxes, I wouldn't want to use that term either necessarily, because to me it is as simple as you described. But safety in numbers, we're hearing a lot from the county and from DOR that, gosh, this needs to read more like others. Well, all right then. And others use that term. The majority of them use that term. I'm happy to simplify it down to lodging tax. Sales tax on lodging services, and that's the structure. But it's kind of sort of who do you try to please, I guess. And we're having a lot of pushback on just the language, and that's irritating to me, frustrating, because the cases are clear that it's the intent of the tax, not the magic. There is no magic word game going on here. But I've tried to play that magic word game a little bit because of the objections that we are getting. So it's up to you guys, which and I'll defend either set of terms, but I can say we're in good company. Look at these, 20 ordinances. I'll talk about excise back on lodging.
And I'll say, even to support what Jerry said, there's going to be stuff that I'm going to bring up in executive session that I can't bring up right now. And it has a lot to do with the way that it's worded.
Can I make this suggestion? Because I absolutely understand what you're saying. And even as I was writing it, every time it came up, I thought, okay, which term am I going to use here? I had that struggle. I really did. But the struggle wasn't random. There's a lot. I've now told you why I did what I did in trying to win, because that's the only thing I care about here is supporting what you're doing. Why don't I suggest this? We can make a few little fixes, the thing Mary mentioned and these other two, on first reading, set it for second reading. You'll hear more in executive session, and we'll take your guidance. And when you see it on second reading, if the decision is that, or the guidance is that we should harmonize the phraseology in a certain way, we'll bring that back to you. Is that all right? Rather than trying to do it here on first.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Tell that.
Until that's been true now for the first two ordinances, and it's still true for this one. Okay.
I did have a question though,
Okay.
under 3.28.090, number G. Would it be you that
issue subpoenas.
right,
Well,
or,
no, if the code gives Mary the power, you'll have the power.
okay, well, okay, in the last sentence though, request the town attorney to seek enforcement of same in
Yeah.
municipal code.
Yeah.
Could that also be our contract prosecutor? Or would it not be appropriate?
It could, the town may request. How about the town treasurer may seek enforcement? And then you figure out who's gonna assist her
Carry that?
in doing that seeking. How about that?
Okay,
It's something prosecutor might not be comfortable with, but might be.
that's why,
Anyway, that's fine.
yeah,
Uh,
okay,
A proper motion would be the adoption of ordinance number 3, series 2023 on first reading with the following amendments. In section 1, insert ordinance number 5, series 2022 in the blank. In section 3.28.010, in the second to last sentence, which reads this tax imposed on the customer purchasing the lodging services, comma, as a vendor. In section 3.28.030, insert in the blank 4.5%. In section 3.28050, in the blank, insert 20th day, and delete the last sentence beginning the vendor may retain 1 35/100. And in section 3.28090 parentheses G, delete the words in the second to last line, request the town attorney to.
next, yeah,
That's a suggested
okay,
motion.
So moved.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number, where are we, 3, on first reading with the amendments discussed. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed. I don't have the information that Jerry says he sent out, and I don't like a couple of these.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Where are we? We have resolution number 3, series 2023. A resolution extending a temporary moratorium on the acceptance and processing of certain applications under the town land use code.
So, public comment has come in to say that they were not able to have a work session, with the DRC as scheduled, which would be the 26th of January. And there was a suggestion to then have a separate work session on February 9th, but then I found out today that that's not going to work either. Half the DRC is going to be in training for 3 days. So what that means is they're going to have to propose another day before that. And so they just did not have enough time in order to get together, in order to share their opposition / suggestions of how this could be changed in order to accommodate both sides. So this is what this does. It actually, it just lengthens the moratorium for, I guess, another month in order for them to meet and discuss this. I've also submitted the details requested to create a process chart of how this should go when a land use situation comes. You know, some of the confusion was if it goes to DRC first and they approve it, it puts an obligation in the planning commission. And so our contracted planner, Community Matters Incorporated, has created a process chart for us to look at. I'm reviewing it, and Jerry has also been submitted. So we're still in that early, we're looking at it, but we would hopefully be ready to present that for that time too.
So the blank in here in this reso is how far to extend the moratorium. Do we do it to the end of February? Do we do it for an additional 30 days? what's everybody's feeling?
Oh, what's realistic that they can get together?
I think by the end of February is fine.
Okay.
No, it's true. February 28th.
Well, so we meet again, we meet on the 28th, so that would be the end of February. If we needed to extend it even further, we could do that.
Sure.
Yeah, you can continuously extend.
Sure.
So what I'm hearing is February 28th.
I would like to see it be less time than that. The resolution was all set and wonderful until a couple of folks said, gee, we didn't even know about it when it was up to them to pay attention to these things. Consequently, for other people, we've said, oh, so sad, too bad. I don't like giving them another, what amounts to a whole second month, because we were ready to vote on this on the 10th before the objections were raised. I think it needs to be sooner.
Okay, one point that you did bring up, Deanne, is how many people is this moratorium holding up? And didn't you look into that and find out it's really not anyone being held up?
Correct.
So at this point, I think in order to give the BRC and Planning Commission and the opponents time to get their schedules to mesh, I think it's appropriate to give them the rest of the month of February.
Can we say March 1st, just so that allows us to meet on February 28th? And
Sure.
if we needed to extend it, that,
Sure, why not?
so it's not like any business day and all of a sudden we're kind of awkward.
Sure.
28th is a Tuesday. It is.
Yes, it
There
is.
we go. So
So,
it's a.
yeah, March 1st is fine with
It's a
me.
fourth Tuesday. Look at that.
Yep.
All right.
So. Okay, so. Given that, who would like to make the motion?
I move to approve resolution number 3, series 2023 with the date of March 1st, 2023. Added into section 1.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve resolution number 3, series 2023. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
I'm going to oppose just on principle.
All right. So we move on to staff items. You've got in your packet, you have the fire authority's annual report from the year 2021. Sorry about the delay in getting that to us. It was provided earlier and it got lost in shuffle and we got another copy. So there it is. Let us know if you have any questions.
It refers to a bunch of charts and graphs and
Can we get the whole?
Yeah, there's a thumb drive that they gave me with 100 documents. And I thought that this one was a summary because it said Clear Creek annual report and it only was 3 or 4 pages.
yeah.
But I also knew that one of our selectmen is part of that and he would love to discuss anything about it.
Anything.
So we will have documents printed in downstairs, so if you want to come by, get some.
It's a fun read.
Right. If you have
Well,
When,
Probably not.
At least an electronic version for us.
Yeah, I would.
Please.
suggest that. That's easy to delete.
when will these be available?
What's that?
When will these be available?
Tomorrow. Send her a link to us. To the.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be available as requested. If you want them, we'll have them ready for you.
Meaning hard copy.
Hard copy.
Okay,
Just by Friday.
okay. Sounds good.
So Friday is when we can pick them up.
Yep.
Thank you.
All righty. Wanted to have just a brief discussion on what topics you might want to bring up when Her name is Julie Suter. She is the representative. She's on Joe Negus's team. And just in preparation, anything that we would be sending with her back to Congressman Negus before he actually visits us. I came up with a few ideas just to get discussion going. Topics that are important to me on a national level would be reproductive health protections, LGBTQ protections, immigration and DACA legislation and protections, climate change and air quality reforms, wildfire measures. That's what I came up on my short list. Anything else?
I haven't given it thought.
Okay, well, there's time.
Rescind Citizens United.
Say again?
The rescinding of Citizens United. Back in
Okay.
2010, it was voted in, and it basically allows corporations to buy our elections. So we need Citizens United overturned or rescinded or whatever they need to do to cancel it.
Okay.
Corporations can buy our election?
Any,
How much?
Corporate
Look
money.
at the money.
it,
We do.
any other topics? We don't have to have them tonight.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So as you say, she's planning on coming next meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, so she would like to spend some time. She'd like to hear also if there's things that are important to you in Georgetown. So I know Lynette's mentioned some national things that we'd like to hear, but also she's taking this back to the congressman. So if there's things that you want them to know about Georgetown specifically, priorities, that she wants to take that back.
okay. So,
I have
No kidding.
talking in private.
okay.
Great.
All right, next would be the town administrator, report. Oh, yeah. The year-end report for 2022.
Great. I know this is something that you guys have been anticipating for months and with bated breath. And I knew this was gonna be a long meeting tonight, so it's already 8:11. But I just want to say, I could go through this. I hope that you've had a chance to look at it. I'm very thankful. I can't say enough of how proud I am to be here, one, but also to have such a great supportive staff. We have a great team, and even like today when we had our meeting, we're so excited just to be able to work a hard team. So these are some of the things that collectively we've accomplished from, and I know I'll just go through it because I think it's something to be proud of. I know this is 155 years that Georgetown's existed, and we've accomplished a lot this past year. Sometimes you forget it, but it's nice to be reminded. Town hall chamber upgrades, successfully did hybrid meetings for all board meetings. That is something that a lot of towns still don't do. And yet we've been able to do that even with some of our issues, like even our second one, upgraded audio and video, though we know this is still a work in progress, but we've made great strides. And I want to say this too, we have accommodated many things in order to get people to be here. We'd love for everyone to be here present, right? That's the goal, is to be here present. But for those who can't, whether it be sickness or in distance, they still have a way to do it. And I just found it this past week that the Congress, our House of Representatives, just passed a new law that says no more proxy voting. You have to be in present. And I'm like, in the highest land, they're saying you have to be present, but little Georgetown is still accommodating a hybrid meeting. So we are grateful that we can do that, even though we could do the same, but we choose not to because we're trying to be inclusive. Staff retention and recruitment, that is a huge goal that you guys passed it on to me when I first got here, even in the interviews, that this was a big deal and you hired me. We have increased salaries to the competitive average. We've hired 2 road and bridge heavy equipment operators, and and I forgot to add another one, but we hired a part-time who used to be here full-time, was, I believe, the supervisor at that time, but we have 3 now. We hired say it again?
Brian?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, so he's doing special projects as needed.
he also could be extremely helpful on historical matters.
Oh, yeah,
He knows where valves are and which
Yeah.
way they turn and.
absolutely. So he is a gold mine for us.
Oh, yeah.
He's currently working on picnic tables and refurbishing them, and they look fantastic. Hired a part-time parks and just a summer worker. We hired John Gaskins to be our police sergeant. We hired Tim Collins to be our new code enforcement. So just in the recruitment and retention, we are doing well. Really exciting. The only area that we're still in question of trying to beef up is our police department. But it's not just us that's struggling, it's nationwide. And but we're doing well for our little town. Street improvements, we have fixed many potholes and regraded many of the mountain slope streets. Patched the pothole and right over here near town hall. We patched the pothole that's in front of the post office, cleaned out the drain in front of the post office, which has been clogged for probably 20 or 30 years. But we went ahead and did that. So now it does drain into the creek. Repaired the sidewalk on Taos and 7th Street. That was a hole that we filled it in. So now someone could walk straight down without tripping. Repainted the bus zone area in front of the Hotel de Paris. Added gravel and regraded Hotel the Paris parking lot, which I've been told that was the first time ever that the town has done that. And that's always been a responsibility for the town, but we did it. And it actually helped our successful tent that was put there for the Christmas market, which was called Rue de Noel. I couldn't remember that.
Really didn't know.
Purchased and installed 14 new bollards to close off 6th Street for downtown events. Removed junk vehicles from the road and bridge lot, which have been there forever. Upgraded new Christmas decorations for 6th Street, the roundabout, and got the floating tree working again. And I was told that has not been in operation for a while as well. 22nd Street approaches. Unfortunately, this is still a work in progress, but it was to be finished when I did this, but it is not.
Deanne, you had a question?
Yeah, there's no mention of the 8th Street stuff.
All of the 8th Street is still a work in progress.
Yeah, but it should be on the list.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, it's.
8th Street.
I think it's later. I mentioned it. Yeah, but this one was accomplished projects like Don said. Parks, upgraded restrooms and automatic locks for Strauss Park and the warming huts. Replaced the cracked toilet at the warming hut. That's when I first got here and they gave us such a hard time. They were not going to do it, but we enforced that it was under warranty and they did. Fixed the toilet problems at Strauss Park, which was all summer. Added heaters in Strauss Park and added heaters downstairs. Fixed the irrigation line at Worland Park. Added a chess game and cornhole game at City and Worland Park. Added foundation dirt to level out the ice rink in Worland Park. Rearranged the ice rink in Worland Park so that it addressed the sloping problems. Strauss Park improvements, we finished completion of phase 1, which was the restrooms itself, and in phase 2, which is the booth foundations and framing, roofing, electrical siding, and what's left now is just the landscaping plan, which will be done this year. But that's a work in progress. Business promotions. I mean, these are events that we celebrated. I know COVID really impacted these events that we haven't been able to do. And now we're back on normalcy, which is exciting. The Georgetown annual cleanup, Memorial Day, Georgetown Days, the Burla races, which I'd never seen in my life before. And I thought that was amazing. So slacker races, which I was told I'm going to try to run in that this year, which I'm like, I don't know how after my ski accident, but whatever. Mountain Jams concert, which was incredible, live music every weekend. The Supathon, which is that paddleboarding, swimming, running event. July 4th, which was huge. I mean, now I see we have 2 huge events, July 4th and the Christmas market. The Mayor Parker's Dog Days of Summer, which I was told that the dog is missing. I don't know if you've heard that. Parker's missing.
Wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yep,
Up the mountain or was he away on something and got lost?
other town, and somehow got displaced and he's still missing because I remember reading him. So you can have some happy thoughts for that. Fire and Ice Chili Cook-Off, another great successful event. John Denver's Georgetown Bighorn Festival, the tree lighting, Christmas tree sales at Silverdale, which was a new thing that we'll most likely do for the next couple of years. Christmas market and the new, oh, there it is, Rue de Noel tent and beer garden. Ice driving, which we hadn't done in a while, that's brought back. And the business mixer, and of course, the lodging tax approval by voters in Clear Creek County coordinated election. So those are our business promotions. Bighorn, these are now specific projects again. Eliminate the large dirt pile and the portion of the Argentine berms at the 5-acre site, which had been there for a long time. That's all now removed, and the trash was removed. Oh, here it is. Remove the trash and construction debris. Hydro seeded the Bighorn Crossing 5-acre. They did hydro seed. Yep. I saw it. I was out there with them.
Okay.
A work in progress is now the resubmittal of the micro apartment development on Bighorn Crossing. Bighorn Crossing Apartments, which is the ones that were sold off. These have submitted changes. So this is a work in progress as well for dark sky compliance, lighting, and the dumpsters to be in the appropriate housing, and to put the dumpster that's in the front right now to put it in the back. Code enforcement. So we have enforced stop work orders when DRC notifies us when projects are not approved or authorized. That is ongoing, and that hasn't been done in a while, and it's obvious because we'll see things and we're aware from the homeowners or whatever. We've never done this. Well, we do now. We stop it. Enforce contractors to not start projects before a COA or building permit is issued. Enforce all new businesses to be reviewed to make sure that the space is appropriate for the use, and having inspections done to make sure it's in compliance to code. These are things too that we have not done in a long time. Professional services agreement. So we have approved IT contract with Axiom, approved new auditor, Mayberry and Company, approved new prosecution attorney, and approved agreement with Ryder to work with Bob Hamilton. We have approved temporary agreement with Community Matters to be our planner. Insurance, we were awarded $27,000 for the replacement of our servers. That was a claim from Sursa. Grants, we were awarded a CDOT Main Street grant for $1 million for the Argentine North project, which will put sidewalks and a bike path all the way down from 15th Street to 22nd Street. Public Works, we paid off one of our water right loan, and that was $49,000. Submitted the CDPHE state watershed wastewater treatment plant discharge permit. We were submitted, we got that. Annual jetting and hydrant flushing, new water line on Main and Biddle. We put in 8 new water service lines, passed a state dam integrity inspection, replaced 1 water hydrant. There's 7 on our list. It's expensive to do and it's timely, but we did 1 this year. Waiting for the results of the infiltration testing of the sewer lines that we should get in the next month. Research to see how much water rates should be increased, which was 1.7% higher than what we originally forecasted of 3%. Code amendments. I know you see this in my packet frequently, so I'll skip that. But these are many code amendments that we've been working on changing. Additional challenges. These are the things more ongoing, but they're still challenges for us today. The XL 4-bay dam decommissioning and sediment issues. Pre-filter damage is $18,000, which they did send us a check to fix that, and that will be on the agenda next time for us to have the funds to be able to purchase that. We did have a mudslide, as you're aware of, in July, and that caused many drainage issues. Street drainage issues are ongoing. The Millsite flooding and drainage issues are ongoing. Kent Stewart, Biddle Street is ongoing. Bighorn Crossing development changes. Silver Plume shooting. Dark sky non-compliance. Bighorn Apartments, the dumpsters non-compliance. Working on purchasing a backhoe for Road and Bridge. They've gone back to now wanting a backhoe. I know that this has gone back and forth from a micro excavator in front of it, but they're back to a backhoe. And We actually are gonna be demoing one this week, so it should be delivered tomorrow. And they're gonna be working at a cost for us, but it's a gently used one. Working on purchasing a backhoe for the water and wastewater. Road and bridge shed is what it's partially done. Town hall relocation or renovation, that's something a plan will be submitted to you this year. Working on bridge repairs, the other approaches and resurfacing. Event parking area in the millings, that's still another an ongoing fun project. Duncan's property and the Benhoff Trail sign that still needs to be put back in.
Yeah.
Neil Duncan, he's that.
Okay. Oh, that's, yeah, got it.
That's Duncan.
But we need to get the sign put back up, and it's been it's been a challenge of trying to get that going, but we're gonna do that this year. Town hall chamber audio ongoing issues. Ice encroachment on Rose Street Bridge, we're aware of, and we're trying to mitigate that. Warming hut restroom doors, we brought that up to you guys, got approval, but they've not been ordered. Only 2 have been ordered at this point, but those 2 were for the wastewater treatment plant doors to be fixed. All right, these are goals that were presented to you earlier, but I'm just reminding you, this can be changed. But administration goals to do a board retreat to discuss selectmen priorities that we can continue to rank them and go after them.
A retreat, are we going to like Hawaii or?
Hawaii.
That's a possibility. We'll put that on the list of considerations.
No, I think those are federal heights. We know you'd like to be.
Create a plan for town hall renovation, expansion, relocation. We'll come up with several plans to see which one is the best that you guys like. Increase affordable housing development, mill site partnership with Habitat, partnership with multi-jurisdictional housing authority, amend code when necessary for mixed use development, create an ordinance to require a percentage of all new family, which is one we're looking at. These are all under affordable housing, increasing that. Business promotions, get lodging tax situation resolved. That's a goal that we will accomplish. Increase business development downtown, which is first to do an inventory of available units, create a focus group to analyze what types of businesses are needed, create incentives to recruit, and go after it. Another one is wayfinding signage, directional kiosks. And another one is ambassador program. This is to get volunteers to help direct visitors and creating the app so that it'd be more user friendly with our visitors. And analyze possibilities for paid lake parking. And lastly, road and bridge, finish construction of the road and bridge shop, road improvements, which will be this fall, not fall, this spring, March is when we probably start. Rose Street from 11th to 15th, that's the resurfacing and concrete pans. Here's where Deanne had mentioned 8th Street sidewalks and concrete pans. That is also scheduled for March. Create an inventory list, and that's working with Skater to rank them for priorities so that we can start coming to you. You'll see what's on the priorities, and we'll know exactly when we would schedule and when we would cut it off at the end of the year, so we would not leave gaps like we've done this year. Finish more bridge approaches and sidewalk walking path on 22nd Street. This is to keep the people from walking in Milton Street, but creating something going there.
What about moving that PD?
Oh yeah, PD relocation. That one was PD.
I was taking that to be under town hall improvement.
Yeah,
It's kind of a big umbrella.
yeah.
That's good.
I know, right?
Any questions?
I think this is great. I like the summary. I'd like to see end of year releases. Or
You've been asking for that. From the
An end of year police report. Okay,
I know you have.
I will get
I'd like to
that.
see it.
I will have one.
It's called accountability.
I hear you. Okay, I'll have that. But anyways, just, you should be proud. You should be proud of what your town staff has accomplished. They have worked really hard and super grateful for them.
So proud of you.
And then Mary.
Yes, we are. We're very
Proud of you.
so, and thank you.
Thank you.
It's a team that makes it happen.
You know, we chose wisely.
All right, so your administrator report, do you have anything to highlight? And you kind of touched
I have
on
that.
everything, so
I think so.
does anybody have any questions for Rick about either his administrator's report or the task list?
Great job.
Okay. That moves us up to executive session.
And the man on my right has the motion. Read it all.
Executive session under CRS 24-6, 402, 4B and E for a conference with the town attorney, town administrator, and appropriate staff to receive legal advice and instruct negotiators concerning pending litigation, lodging tax, and I further move to adjourn the board meeting at the conclusion of this executive session.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We'll give it time to have you reconnect, Deanne, and get things set up.
So 10 minutes?
Fast.
Something like